So I think it's really hard to talk about an older game like Assassin's Creed 1. It's often considered not a masterpiece, but like a really important game. It kickstarted the entire franchise, and I think it deserves a lot of slack since it was the first game in a franchise that went on to improve a lot of the problems it had. But looking at it on its own as a game for this two-part review, I do want to go over some stuff that I really think this game got wrong. If you haven't already seen the first part of my review, I already did 5 things that Assassin's Creed 1 did right. These are the things that I absolutely love about the game, and I want to go through and just talk about the things that I think it did wrong to varying extents. So the first one is just the repetitive nature of the game in general. The whole game is just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I didn't really feel like the assassinations themselves were that unique. The characters that you go after are, but the assassinations themselves are not. It's because there's only limited ways to actually do them. You can't really assassinate from within a vantage point. And what I mean by that is like not a normal vantage point like for synchronizing up at the top like a leap of faith point, but like you can't dive down onto an enemy from a roof like you could in later games. You can't really use your hidden blade in combat like you could in later games. You can't really use different weapons. There's just a couple of them, unlike later games. And it's not just the gameplay styles that are repetitive or the actual targets themselves, but it's also just the mission structure. So from just the normal old mission structure itself, you will go after a target. And what will happen is you will do all of these build-up missions towards it. And they're not side missions, they're like build-up story missions. So you'll have to go and listen to a couple characters talk about something, and then you know, oh, there's this weakness or this thing I can exploit to get to this enemy. Or you will have to go and actually take out a certain number of Templar enemies for another assassin and then get that information from them like an informant, or you will have to go and beat up an informant for the Templars. And it's the same things over and over again. There is really no variety to them. And even the characters that you work for, they have like the same voices, the same looks to them, like they're just the same character model. And there's just a lot of reused assets in them along with the repetitive structure of the missions. It's essentially like a 1, 2, 3 target, 1, 2, 3 target over and over and over again for the entire game. And I think that that's something that later games went on to fix, even though some of them did add a little bit too much filler story. The second problem that I think this game really suffered from was the side activities. They're all really bad. If you do them like once, like you do like 1 or 2 of these one time, it's fine. It will suffice. Like you'll be like, oh, I went and I did a save a citizen mission. Okay. The problem is there's so many of them and so few other things to do. There really isn't much side content to this game. There is no end game other than going around and finding collectibles, and these have to be some of the most pointless collectibles I've seen in a game. They're really just Templar flags, essentially. Like you go around, find a flag that's just thrown in a random spot. There's so many of them. They don't do anything for you. They don't provide anything in game that really matters. It's just outside the core story, there's nothing here to do. There's nothing worth your time. This game is really just worth your time to get in, find out the beginning of Desmond's story and Altair's story, and sort of move on from there into 2 and the later games. The third thing that I didn't really like about this game was the sound design, and that's going to sound like a nitpick to some people, like, oh, like there's obviously other things you can criticize about the game, but it's immersion breaking. And I don't really know why they decided to go with this, because if you listen to the sounds in this game, and I'll try to play some of them, like the voicing and stuff, a lot of things sound like they're underwater.
What? Anyone see him? There he is! Stop running! You cannot escape! He won't get away! You cannot run forever!
I think they tried to make the sound design almost like it's a game within a game, or a simulation, which it is, but I really don't think that helped the game. I think instead it just made it so that when you're actually in areas like Jerusalem and Acre, it sounds really garbled and muffled. And on top of that, not much effort went into the sound design of this game because there's just so many repeated lines of dialogue. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard someone repeat the same line of dialogue so many times as I have running through this world and coming across side missions. There's something about it that really pulls me out of the game when I hear it compared to when I see it. It's like the visuals for the game have aged very well, but the audio for it really has not. The fourth thing that this game did wrong was the lack of activity in the outside world. So there are some activities to do in the world of the past, but when you get to the outside world with Desmond, there's really nothing going on. There's a computer you can check for some information, you find one or two items throughout the game, and there's a couple of discussions with Lucy in the modern day. Other than that, there's nothing else. You can't really do anything in the modern day setting, and it sort of made it feel kind of tacked on. I liked the actual story bits in the outside world, but the activities themselves, they really could have used some work, I think. The final thing that this game really needed to improve is the combat. And I don't want to sound like that guy who says everything needs to be difficult like Dark Souls. It doesn't. But you don't have to do anything. I mean, almost every enemy in this game, you can just hold right trigger and counter. That's it. You just block, counter. And you get so much of your health back even during combat that there never is really a challenge there. It's always just block, counter, dead, block, counter, dead, block, counter, dead. And you move on to the next group. I mean, you can just defeat hordes of enemies in this one really easily. And I know that 2 and 3 had that problem a little bit as well, but there was such cool combat in those games that it incentivized you not to just do that. Whereas this game, the combat's very basic, and you really don't have an incentive not to just cheese it. So hey, it's a little shorter than normal, but this is the second half of my review of Assassin's Creed 1. These are the 5 things that I think the game really could have improved, and I know that they went on to improve almost all of these in sequels. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you enjoy this video? Did you enjoy the review in general? What are your thoughts? Next up, I believe, is The Last of Us, so I hope you'll tune in for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day, everybody. You guys rock.